group had the short story The Hand. It exemplifies the dominant and submissive roles of men and women in relation to the patriarchal views held by society in which women are deemed inferior. The wife is physically smaller than her husband, so even physically he holds most of the power in the relationship. And we could see this when the couple was sleeping. She is scared to move, she doesn't want to wake him up, and she arches her back so she doesn't seem too heavy on him. The progression of her internal struggle mounts as she describes him less endearingly and more fearful. She found his strength attractive at first. Now she realizes just how dangerous it is and how her new role as a submissive wife basically scares her. And despite her uneasiness from the night before and her uncomfortable thoughts, she still wakes up the next day to perform her wifely duties like making breakfast.
Within the story, the author conveyed this realization through darkness and light. The story began in the evening when it was notably dark outside. As the story progressed, the night turned into day, and simultaneously the wife became aware of her fears. In the evening, she was metaphorically blind to her complete submissive role, but by the daylight, her harsh reality was illuminated. The author took this even further by specifically having the wife start to see her husband differently when the light from the window landed on his hand. The wife both literally and figuratively begins to see her husband in a new light. She went from praising his strength and his dominance to being frightened by it. The transition from dark to light is her reality dawning on her new life as a submissive housewife.
The author also uses physical marks to convey her point. The man is at first painted as a regular-looking, almost welcoming guy, but as she further observes him, she begins to see his physical appearance as vile and something to be fearful of, as the author begins to describe him as a somewhat primitive being indicating danger. These physical descriptions could be a projection of the woman's internalized fear and regret of her impulsive decision that now leads to her future of playing the undesired role of a submissive woman and the realization that the man next to her is a stranger. Or it could be a metaphorical way of illustrating the man as a monster internally and showing his true colors. However, there could also be complexity between him actually being a monster and her creating this monster in her mind, because the husband has never actually done anything wrong to make her believe this, but she created this monster in her mind, similar to how Frankenstein was created. This may be because she was projecting the role she has to play by society as an inferior and submissive woman onto this man, not because of who he is as a person, but because of his sex.
Most stories have a political element to them, and this one was no different. This story examined sexism in marriages and in society in general.
Story, The Hand, goes against society's view of sexism and patriarchal roles and how the woman should be submissive and inferior to the man, because the woman tells the story through her perspective and she doesn't paint her role as being submissive in a good light. It's painted in a negative light throughout the story. He kind of holds an antagonist role, and this is done so that the reader is more inclined to take the woman's side, which would be showing us that this sexism and women feeling inferior is something that we should be against ourselves, just like that woman is, because it's told from her perspective. At the end of the story, the woman is submissive to the role she's supposed to be playing, despite not being happy in this role. The reader came to the conclusion that this dominant submissive role between them is not healthy,